Hi, my name is Sienna and I'll be interviewing Dr Elise Smith. She's the Assistant Professor in the History of Medicine. My first question today is, could you introduce a little bit about your research, please?
So I am working on a book called Skulls, Nation and Empire, The Rise and Fall of British Craniology, which is a history of craniometrical theory. So craniometry refers to the measurement of skulls. And this was a primary tool of racial science in the 19th century. So huge collections of human skulls were gathered from around the world and they were sent to British institutions, British museums, academies and medical schools. And those heads were measured, and the dimensions of people's skulls was tied to ideas around racial hierarchies, the idea that certain people were superior to others based on the size and shape of their brain casing. And those measurements were also used as a basis for racial classification, right? So the idea that different people had fundamentally different head shapes that they could be categorized by. And so this was a primary tool of scientific racism in the 19th century, became hugely popular and influential, and eventually it did get discredited. It's now considered to be a pseudoscience. So I look at the process by which that idea got discredited, right? And what I argue is that it's not because people become less racist or more sort of cynical about racial ideology, but actually the methods themselves start to undermine the process, right? They become far too convoluted and complex to be sustained. And the rise of modern statistics and greater ideas around statistical accuracy and correlation come about. So it becomes very, very hard to sustain the idea that head size is linked to intelligence, for example. And it increasingly gets recognized that there's more variety within racial types than between them, right? So this fundamentally discredits the idea that there are different racial categories that can be identified through physical dimensions.
How did you integrate your research into the modules that you're teaching?
So I teach on a variety of undergraduate modules. I, for example, teach on the first year option, Mind, Body and Society. So it's a sort of survey of medical history, and I teach quite a few sessions, but one of the ones I do is on the history of measurement and classification and how these tools that are borrowed from the natural sciences end up being integrated into ideas around the body, right? So ideas around race as well as ideas around health. I also teach a third year option called Medicine, Empire and the Body, which is it's a 30 CAT module that explores the broad relationship between health, medicine and disease in the history of European colonization. And again, I teach quite a few sessions that relate to racial science, to medical anthropology, to racial anthropology. So I bring ideas that come straight from my research into the classroom, and I like to have my students read lots of the same sources that I have to look at for my own research. I have them grapple with the same kind of questions that I ask in my research, and teaching that module has immensely informed the way that I approach these topics.